and aging more than any other time in life. So I invite you, if you have a pen, I'm going to take a quiz right now. And I invite you to jot down what you think the average life expectancy was in the year 1800. In the year 1900. In the year 2000. What it is now. And what you would guess it would be in the year 2021. So you get to self-correct your quiz. In 1800, life expectancy average was 37 years old. In 1900, it was 47 years old. In the year 2000, in the turn of our century that we each knew, average life expectancy had increased to 77. The 20th century gave us each 30 years that no generation ever had before. And life expectancy today is estimated at average 84. And by 2021, 104. We're living longer, healthier, hopefully, and we're having fewer babies. Our social systems, our housing stock, and many of our cultural norms were designed for a younger population because where we are and where we're heading has never happened before. In the past, the silo of aging looked just at our elderly. How are we going to take care of those that were like our grandmothers or great-grandmothers who were old because of the health at their time? But now we are living to be welderly, and we have years and decades to contribute. And so we welcome ourselves to look at the opportunities, not just to serve and take care of older adults, but to engage and to keep vibrant and to serve our community in better and better ways. This age generation that's coming, the longevity generation, offers us new challenges as well as new opportunities to change. Lancaster City chose to take a look at this. How will our needs change, and how can we serve and engage this great and ever-growing asset of older adults? And so by joining the World Health Organization's Age-Friendly Cities program, Lancaster committed to a 5-year plan. The first 2 years are about planning, involving older people, assessing where we are, looking at those petals of that daisy that I showed you, and developing an action plan. Right now, we're on that phase, developing an action plan. Many of our efforts were put on hold when March 2020 came around, but other things did come forward with the mission statement that was adopted by Age-Friendly Lancaster City. It's to connect generations and organizations. You can see that that's happening today. And by developing a backbone organization, Landis communities stepped up to hold this framework so that we could become an age-friendly city. As the backbone, Landis is partnered with our Lancaster downtowners as well as the city of Lancaster. And we're looking towards the involvement of more organizations, individuals, and forming an advisory group. And together, these will divide out into action teams depending upon projects. So you're going to get to hear more about what we've done. But what I want to do now is invite our mayor to come on board. As she said on Monday in the Lancaster newspaper online, she said that she often thinks of Lancaster as a laboratory city. We're small enough to try big things and make real change, and we're big enough to matter. I say that Lancaster is a magnet for boomers and a microcosm of America. And I think these ingredients are represented here today. And I welcome Deneen Sirachi to come on board.
Good morning, Chris, and thank you. And also thank you for my t-shirt, which I really love. And I understand I'm not the only one that benefited from receiving a t-shirt, so I appreciate that. I would like to also add my thanks to the many sponsors who are making this morning happen. And boy, isn't this kind of surreal that we're gathering in this way, but I have to say I'm really enjoying seeing everybody's faces and flipping through and recognizing many familiar faces and seeing some new faces that are involved in this work. I'd also like to recognize three people without which I would not have the pleasure of joining you and advancing the work of Age-Friendly Lancaster. And they are Melissa Ressler, Yvonne Berge, and Chris Kennedy, of course. This trio of ladies showed up in my office one day early in my tenure as mayor and pitched this concept of an age-friendly Lancaster city. And I will be honest, I had heard something about this at a conference for mayors, but I didn't fully understand the implications and the opportunity that presented itself. I mean, obviously, I'm very aware that we have many older adults that are moving into Lancaster City, downsizing from their homes in the suburbs, giving up their lawn mowing Saturdays to try to have a different experience. And I know that there are other longtime residents who are continuing to age in place in their homes here in the city where they have raised their families. So last year's summit, presented by Age-Friendly Lancaster and hosted by the United Way, brought together 40 people from 26 organizations and identified 3 priorities. And they are priorities that are important to me too. And those are housing, access to services, and purpose and meaning in later life. This year's summit is presented by the United Way and the Lancaster County Community Foundation. We're so happy to have the foundation joining with more than 140 people registered, representing over 70 organizations. And so you can see how this has just continued to gain momentum over the last year. And so what a difference a year can make, even a year as challenging as this one. And boy, this will go down in the record books, right? So today's focus groups breakout groups will really focus on these same 3 priorities: housing, access to services, purpose, and meaning in later life. In between these summits, there has been a lot of work that you will be hearing more about during your time together. But I want to talk about 2 ways in particular that the city of Lancaster is advancing our commitment to being an age-friendly city. And they are Vision Zero and Healthy Homes. I don't know how many of you have heard about Vision Zero, but it is an international movement to eliminate traffic-related deaths and serious injuries. So whether you're driving, riding a bike, or walking, we want your experience in Lancaster City to be safe. And a frequent complaint that I hear is that cars travel too fast in the city and they do not yield to pedestrians. And as a walker and resident of the city of Lancaster, and even if you are a visitor in Lancaster, you probably have observed these same behaviors. And I hope that you, as we all need reminded, the speed limit is 25 miles an hour everywhere in the city of Lancaster. So we are a walking city, and the more that we walk, the healthier we are, the healthier our environment is, the more our retail and restaurant establishments thrive. We want foot traffic downtown and in our neighborhoods. This is the fabric of our community. Our social connection to one another often comes when you bump into somebody on the street and you have a spontaneous conversation with a neighbor, a colleague, a business owner, an elected official that you might not otherwise have. And so we want to make sure that our city remains very walkable, and that requires all of us to pay attention in new and different ways. So we are investing in both the public education related to creating a more inviting experience for our residents and visitors alike, but we're also investing in the street engineering to think about what do we need to be doing differently to create safer intersections? How much more paint do we need to be putting on the streets to increase the visibility of crosswalks? How do we narrow streets so that the crossing lane is shorter so that it provides more time for folks who are either holding the hands of a small child or who need a little extra assistance to be able to cross that street, that distance is narrower. So this is one way that we are advancing the work, and one of those petals that are on the flower that Chris showed earlier. The second way is related to healthy homes. Healthy homes are homes that are free from lead paint, from infestation and mold. They are air and water tight. They have smoke and carbon monoxide detectors. And unfortunately, because 90% of our homes in the city of Lancaster were built before 1940, they often need repairs, and these repairs can be quite costly. Right before the pandemic hit in January, we hosted Age-Friendly Lancaster and the city of Lancaster hosted a summit that was really focused on healthy homes and how we could help low-income homeowners, seniors in particular, stay in their homes when it was time to make costly repairs or to make modifications to their home that would allow them to remain in their home. Because we know that the most affordable place that you live is where you're at right now. And so how can we help you sustain that? So although COVID derailed these efforts, this is work that I hope we can return to in the year ahead, as it is so important to the future of our city. And so now I'd like to turn the program back to Chris. I want to thank you again for joining this morning and for your commitment to make Lancaster a welcoming and friendly place for everyone. And I appreciate this opportunity to be with you again. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Deneen. Yes, round of quiet applause. Thank you. I think that we are so fortunate to have Mayor Deneen Sirachi in this time. And I'm so grateful for what she's done to make this a city that I love to live in. So now I'm going to go back to screen share. There we are. So as Deneen mentioned, this is happening today because of a new coming together that came with the question, is age-friendly Lancaster an important topic for us to be looking at in this time of pandemic? And the four things that we said, yes, it's important to come together to do this, because what we want to do is be able to share with all of you what Age-Friendly Lancaster City has done before and during the pandemic. We want to keep the conversation going about the possibility and the merit of an age-friendly Lancaster County. We want to highlight the intergenerational projects that have happened during COVID, that are lessons that we can learn from and can apply in other places. And bottom line, We want to foster more opportunities for intergenerational connections in the next 6 months. So our agenda for today, we're going to listen. We're going to hear about some of our olders and youngers experiences that have happened during COVID. We're going to learn about 2 projects that we hope can be templates to listen, learn, and care. And then our breakout groups, which we have 13 breakout groups and 13 leaders so that you can be divided cross-generationally. Those of you that indicated a preference, you will be in that preference group. And I thank now those 13 leaders that said yes to being part of this bold experiment. And one of those that we're going to hear from now is Sam Bressy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Age-Friendly Lancaster Summit. I'm Sam Bressy. I'm CEO of Lancaster County Community Foundation. I'm really honored to be working today in partnership with the City of Lancaster and with the United Way of Lancaster County to support this important initiative for our community. You know, at the Community Foundation, we work to embolden extraordinary community. But we know that a community can only be extraordinary if everyone's voice is heard, if everyone has a seat at the table, and if everyone has access to what the vibrancy of the city and county has to offer. So when we looked at the opportunity to provide some funding and sponsor today's event, we said this is vitally important. We need the voices of our aging population, our senior leaders, the people in our community who have the most experience, the most knowledge, a sense of vibrancy and passion for Lancaster County. We need to invite them to be part of building the future of our city, the future of our county, the future of our community. So today, you're going to hear about some programs that are really exciting. You're going to get to share your ideas with each other. You're going to get to inspire each other about what might come next. And when those conversations are percolating in your mind, I invite you to reach out to the Community Foundation. Know that we are working today to make lives and our community better. And know that we're doing this by building on what came before us, by standing on the shoulders of those community champions who cared deeply about Lancaster County, worked in their time to make their community better, and invested through the Community Foundation to create a legacy to build and continue their work even past their lives. That's our opportunity, the opportunity of a generation. We call it Forever Lancaster. We encourage you again to do your work today, to roll your sleeves up, to put your passions to the test, to challenge yourself to be plugged into everything that's good, to find your passion and to execute it on a daily basis. And in doing that, we also encourage you to see us about making sure that that legacy that you're building today will live on for generations to come. So enjoy the rest of your morning and learn a lot. And you know where to find us, lankfound.org. Again, really thankful for our partners at the city and at United Way of Lancaster County. Thankful for Chris Kennedy and her work and her passion that she brings to this issue, this vitally important issue. And I wish you a really wonderful rest of the morning.
Thank you, Sam. We're next going to hear from Kevin Ressler for the second year, stepping up to host Age-Friendly Lancaster Summit. Kevin.
I'm grateful for your presence. I want to specifically thank the mayor for her stepping up and helping us to become an age-friendly city. And we want to obviously in this conversation begin that expansion to be designated as an age-friendly county. Because
Kevin, can you get closer to your mic?
Sorry, I can.
Or turn your volume up. It's a little hard to hear you clearly.
Yeah, give me 1 second. I just need to change there. There we go. For some reason, Zoom always turns my mic back down. Can you hear me now?
Very well. Thank you.
So again, wanted to thank the mayor for her leadership in stepping up and helping us become an age-friendly city. And now we want to, have that be a county. At United Way, we think about things in the countywide, and so that's an important part of why we wanted to begin by hosting this before I worked here last year, but why I was also absolutely excited to continue that conversation. I also want to thank for all of you who received a t-shirt, Bob Bowman, a longtime United Way supporter who has helped to make that possible. And my team at United Way, we've put a number of resources of our staff into this effort. I often say that it's important to see a commitment when you see where people put their staffing and their resources. I'm here personally because I have learned so much about aging over the last about 12 years. Those 12 years coincide with my knowing Melissa Ressler, who studied this type of work, who, when I met her and as a volunteer, a year-long volunteer, she cared deeply about these communities, which as a 23-year-old didn't necessarily meet my framework. Right? That wasn't where my focus was, but Melissa has always thought about next generations. And when I was the director at Meals on Wheels, again, there was the opportunity to be engaged with people like Lon Weibel and Brian Long, who I know are on this call as well, and understanding that the conversations that we have around aging are too often segmented in particular ways. One of the successes that I believe, one of the reasons we had success while I was at Meals on Wheels was I believe the changing framework of how we looked at what we were doing. From the sense of we pity old people and we want to help them, to a position of gratitude. One that said, we have an opportunity now to look at those who came before us, those who taught ourselves and our children in our schools, who built the companies that we work for, who maybe didn't have a paying job, but were family supports and other informal occupations. All of those individuals were an opportunity for us to say thank you, not to say I pity you, because we recognized the strength and power. And then we began to look at the reality that we were using volunteers, largely older, in very minimal ways, and realizing that volunteers have so much to give. And that's what this age-friendly process is really about. And why I'm so excited is this is how we look at the community, which is really young in the city, but is also aging in the city and in the county, and understanding that we have to be just as much attention as people age as we do when they're educating, when they're little kids, and we think so passionately about that. And it's so important that we make sure that we include everyone. So the other thing that I've been really grateful to learn, another critical partner for this has been Landis Communities. And in my conversations with that community, I've learned so much about how what are called CCRCs or retirement communities haven't always served in the same way everyone in our community. Moravian, one of our sponsors, invited me to speak about racism, and I learned from them as well the lack of diversity that exists in our retirement communities. Places like Landis and Willow Valley and Fairmount, all of these sponsors that we have are interested in this conversation. Why? Because they know they want to serve everyone, but the systems of iniquity in our society don't always allow the structures that we have built to do that. This is about being innovative. This is about bringing new ideas, new initiatives to the fore that reframes the way we do aging in our society in a way that doesn't leave people out because of their race or their historical income, and make sure that there is a place for the dignity of everyone. As they age in our community, they are valued. They are valued deeply. and we will build institutions and infrastructure to make sure that their place is the one that they deserve as a place of honor. Most societies in the world look at aging individuals with a term elder because they know they have so much to help us as we develop the next steps of what society will continue to look like. Thank you so much for your presence here. Thank you so much for how you contribute to the growth and success of our aging population and our society as we move into a new way post-COVID of understanding how we exist in the world.
Kevin, thank you so much. What we have here today is the union of 3 different mission statements. United Way is to mobilize the caring power of community to achieve impactful, systemic social change within our community. And our Lancaster City, Age-Friendly City mission statement is to connect generations, organizations, and resources to enhance the lives of older adults and ensure an inclusive community where all ages flourish. And then the Community Foundation puts it very succinctly: to embolden extraordinary community. And with this coming together, we have had a whole process of co-creation. When we began talking about this idea of a next summit, at the same time, there were a number of social topics that were pretty forefront for us. There was the rise of new knowledge about systemic racism, and of course, COVID. And the slogan that you see on our screen today and on many of our t-shirts, those of you that do not have one on today, is because your registration came in after the t-shirt order went in, but watch your mail, it will be coming soon. This was adopted when the concept of listen, learn, care was being co-created by someone else. It evolved from the wisdom and advice from our Lancaster County citizen leaders as we all responded to 2 major challenges we face today: the coronavirus pandemic and a racist system of inequality and injustice. And if we learn to listen to each other, to commit to learn about what we do not know, we can find ways to care for the needs of our community. So as things were progressing for the summit and this concept of listen and learn, and then the Lancaster Cares Fund, up came this slogan, and we're grateful for the generous offer to gift each of you with one of these t-shirts, with the hope that today's summit is just a beginning of how we can grow the Lancaster Cares concept that began with the pandemic. I've gotten so good at screen share. Okay. So listen, care. And now it's all about you. There was as we looked at co-creating this summit, we asked you a number of questions and we collected information about you. So for those of you that did let us know, here's who's in the room today. As the mayor said, we had over 70 organizations represented. It's not just about our elderly, and it's not just about old anymore. So almost half of us are somewhere between our 50s and 70s. We have almost 10% of us that are somewhere between 75 and 95. We have some of those youngers between 20 to 40, close to 20-25% of us in the room. And we wanted to know, why did you come? What do you want to learn? And so I invite you to look at one another as I share some of the reasons that people came to the summit today. They wanted to learn how to have their organizations partner with others and create new collaborations. You've already heard about one that's never happened before, United Way, Age-Friendly City, and the Community Foundation. And some of you wanted to become involved in planning for the challenges and opportunities of our next generation aging. That was almost 50% of you were interested in that. And we definitely want to carry that forward. Other things that people mentioned were they want to learn about this sector that they don't know much about. They want to learn how their agency can connect and provide programs for older adults and learn more of what older adults want. They want to learn how we can overcome racial inequality in senior housing. These are important issues, and some of them that we'll get to look at a glimpse of today, and others I just want you to know that the answers are all in this virtual room right now. If we can come together and think and collaborate, we can come up with new ways to look at things that haven't ever happened before. So we get now to learn about two projects that have come together during COVID. And there we go. The project that I'm going to highlight right now has been called Racism and the Art of Intergenerational Conversations. I want to take you back to May of 2020, when many people stepped up and stepped out into our streets. Others stepped up in other ways and in other places. Moravian Manor, one of our retirement communities in Lidditz, hosted a 4-part series on systemic racism. The final session featured Kevin Ressler, our CEO of United Way. Good picture of Kevin, isn't it? As the Q&A session began, one of the older adults, one of 50 older adult residents of Moravian Manor, asked Kevin the question, what can we do? Recognizing that we are privileged to live the life we've lived and we care about racism, but what at this time and place can we do? Kevin thought about it for a minute and then said it all begins with conversations. You are the ones who lived through segregation. You're the ones that were around during the dawn of the civil rights movement. Many of you marched then. And through your years, the depths of systemic racism has continued to foster. Share your stories with your adult children, with your grandchildren, and with younger generations. It all begins with conversations. And from that seed that Kevin planted that day, Moravian Manor partnered with Bright Side Opportunity Center to create this pilot program, and 3 brave older adults offered to participate in this experiment. We had 4 different sessions, and the first one was just the older gens by themselves, And they got to generate a list of questions that they would want to ask younger generation students, young adults of color. Among their questions were, what experience did you have in high school of economic and cultural differences? What discrepancies between races did you see growing up? What does it mean to you to be in a city that's very white? And on the other side, we had our Bright Side Baptist Church and Opportunity Generation Center in Lancaster City. We had our younger gens, and they too had a meeting just with the three of them and facilitation. And they wanted to know, what is your definition of racism? What does that word racism mean to you? When do you remember first becoming aware that there was racial discrimination? And what have been your experiences with people of color? And one other, what, if any, racial bias did your parents raise you to believe? How and when and what caused you to change your views about racism? The second session partnered an older gen with a younger gen. And thanks to technology and Zoom, this was all done remotely and safely in Zoom. Our younger gen partnered with an older gen and had one-on-one conversations about those lists of questions that came up. For the third session, we engaged, well, actually for the whole design of this project, we had engaged Susan Pearlstein, who is a consultant in creative aging. And she gave our older gens and younger gens a crash course, Art 101 and collage techniques on steroids. Our older gen partners co-worked in their one-on-one breakouts to make their own art. There were no instructions that the pieces needed to connect in any way, yet they all did. Our final session was an art gallery. Our artists invited family and friends to see their work. Each partner introduced their artist partner. So in this case, David from Bright Sides introduced Michael, who he had gotten to know. The two of them focused on redlining and the impact of that. And then David was introduced by Michael, and his collage was discussed. Rich used the image of the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and his partner Naja took that same image, but in her own collage and creative way. Carla and Alyssa both looked at a journey and ended with conjoining hands with change and courage. As I said, we didn't say make your works work together, but amazingly, Rich, his side of the Pettus Bridge, looked at where we had come from, slavery, all the way to Martin Luther King. And under the bridge, or on the bridge, but under the top of it, are photos of Rich at different ages when those things were happening. And the flow of that river then goes into Naja's art, where we look at now and moving forward into the desired future. And that was our project, Racism and the Art of Intergenerational Conversations. How might this one pilot be of greater service? There's many possibilities, but no answers yet. We welcome you to use this as a spark. Thank you for being here to listen to all that we learned. and to show how we cared. And now I invite you to learn about another intergenerational project, a concept that's seeded not just during the pandemic, but because of the pandemic.
We have all experienced significant changes in 2020, with alterations to routines core to our being. COVID-19 impacted all generations and separated us from one another in the communities we built.
Schools closed down, and even in the smaller situations where children and volunteers or teachers are together, we would not be able to go into a school or any kind of community gathering place together. So it stopped it, virtually stopped it.
Just like all of you, my world was upended in March in the ways that things changed quickly and we didn't have new ways. And since I'm a therapist, I had an insider's view into how this was affecting real people and real lives, families, children, school children. And one of the things that I really witnessed was how parents felt just really alone and unsure.
One of the big areas of concern for us has been social isolation. And this is not new, but it's just really become more impactful. For us, we've seen, families not able to visit older adults, whether they're in their own homes or in nursing homes. And so, for us, we do believe that one way to combat social isolation is through intergenerational programs.
Lancaster Cares Grant was a fund that we launched with Lancaster County Community Foundation and United Way of Lancaster County to support COVID-19 response. From March, in a couple of months, we raised over $1 million. And as of a week from now, we will have dispensed all of that, funding over 100 organizations in their response to COVID-19 and emerging unanticipated needs that no one could have budgeted for. Thank you for your support.
As classrooms emptied, learning shifted to virtual, with students now at home or in other community-based settings. The emerging support needs were apparent, and so too were our community assets as older adults learned how to utilize the same virtual technology. Age-Friendly Lancaster City explored a way to safely bring together generations for a new type of connection. Funded by Lancaster Cares, Z-Tutors emerged as a partnership between communities and schools, Fulton Elementary, and the Lancaster Downtowners.
The Z-Tutor program is a virtual meeting between a member of Lancaster Downtowners or other senior volunteer and children who are in need of maybe some extra help with their reading skills. The look on his face when he read his story to me and showed me how far he'd gotten with the illustrations was priceless, absolutely priceless.
It's been really wonderful to connect with a student that I otherwise wouldn't have learned to know. And I was also able to meet his family, and I wouldn't have been able to meet them either.
Él está más interesado en la lectura, ya no está tan frustrado en cuando va a leer, ya no está tan como triste en su para leer. Él está más entusiasmado y
I don't know who looks forward to this more, Chandon or me.
The Z-Tutors would help parents and has helped a small group feel less alone. It helps young people get much needed one-on-one academic and emotional support, and it brings the generations together. This has been one of the biggest losses of COVID.
I just want to commend the Lancaster Cares Emerging Needs Fund for their support of intergenerational programs. The Z-Tutor project is a perfect fit and no doubt will mutually benefit both young and old. So we want to just say thanks to them for their efforts.
So, a lot's been happening, and now it's going to be your turn. Oh, wait, that's not what I want to do. Okay, we're going to move into our breakouts, and I'm going to ask Melissa Ressler, who has been our amazing techie throughout the development of this day and ideas and setting up our breakouts. So, Melissa?
All right. Your sound off. Thank you, Chris, and good morning, everyone. I'm really happy to be in this space together with you today. So we're moving into the conversation and idea generation portion of the day, and we're going to be using the Zoom breakout rooms to gather in small groups of about 5 to 8 people per group. There are 13 different groups, and each group has a leader identified who will guide you through discussion in the listen, learn, care format. So very soon there's going to be a button that pops up on your screen asking you to join one of the breakout rooms. Click join and you'll be gathered in with your small group. The same thing when it's time to leave. A button will pop up, you click it, and you'll re-enter this large group space. If you have the capability and you're not already, I encourage you to share your video for this portion of the summit, and also please be prepared to unmute yourself. So each group has a focus of either access to services, housing, or purpose and meaning in later life. These are the 3 priorities that have been identified as part of Lancaster's age-friendly city assessment process. Many of you shared via the pre-summit survey which one your preferred topic was, and you're in that group. Everyone else was randomly assigned. You're encouraged to record your answers in the breakout room chat boxes so that the ideas shared can be captured. There will be no video recordings happening in the breakout rooms. Throughout your small group discussion time, either Chris Kennedy or Larry Gingrich, who has been assisting me with the Zoom platform today too, will pop into your group for a class photo. If you smile quickly, they'll be in and out quickly. All right. If you need any type of assistance while you're in the breakout rooms, there is a button that says ask for help. Click that and I'll jump into your group and get things figured out. While you're discussing, I will also be sending a few messages throughout the conversation to help with timekeeping. That's it. I'm going to open the rooms. You can go ahead and join and work together towards some new ideas for intergenerational connections.
Well, hello and welcome back, everyone. We had a grand idea of being able to show class photos of each group, and technology and user expertise did not favor us. So we are going to flip through very quickly and ask each of our hosts that hosted our breakout spaces if you would give us your one takeaway. And I'm going to start first with Sarah. And Sarah Yankowski, you were working with housing access to services. Could you share with us?
Yeah, sure. So I think the main takeaway from our group is really expanding the access to mentoring program, and not only for the older generation, but also for the younger generation as well. So maybe that's expanding teachers to manage Ephrata. There are 2 people in my group that would be willing to do that and run with it and really. But the group consensus was really that something comes out of the pandemic time, and that there's just more programming that, you know, not only helps the older generation, but helps the younger generation as well. So, you know, whether that's, you know, youngers changing, tutoring olders about, you know, Zoom and all this electronic stuff that everybody's using, and just making sure that there's more collaboration.
Thank you, Sarah. And could we next have Rennie for access to services?
Hello, everybody. 2 quick things. One thing that I was really happy to hear, someone who is teaching future nurses, that there's a lot of energy. Social justice is really kind of galvanizing them. They're eager and excited about serving in the future. And I know as someone who works in long-term care, that was surprising and wonderful to hear. Another surprising thing, we learned about a particular sort of formal resource for seniors that wasn't utilized a whole lot more during the pandemic. And I think that as we talked, we realized that it's more the informal services that get used and that are helpful. They're more organic and natural and authentic. So those were two interesting takeaways from our sort of wide-ranging talk about access to services.
Rennie, thank you so very much. And next we will hear from Michelle on access to services. Michelle from Landis at Home.
Thanks, Chris. I think what we learned is that having more people in a room to talk about things certainly increased the list of resources that were available, that most of us, not all of us, knew of each other's resources. So that was always helpful. I think getting people together and sharing that is always a plus. I think what we talked about was that it has been a challenge. There are some services available to seniors to access things, but getting that word out to the seniors has been challenging. Some of them are not as tech savvy. Some of them are just not able to access for whatever reason. That really is a challenge that we thought was worth trying to take a look at, as well as how can we get the information to the end user that really needs to know what the resources are. And Kat had shared with us just how much she enjoyed hearing about the Z Tutors program and how her daughter, who is virtually learning from home, actually participated and came into the room to hear more about that and said, wow, this is kind of a neat program. They live in York County, and she has some excitement around that program, and maybe there's room for that to expand outside of just our little Lancaster area. So thanks for sharing all of that.
Well, Michelle, thank you so much. And we do have a couple of people from York County here today. Kathy Bollinger, who's in charge of their Engaging Aging program out of their community foundation, is part of our group today. So that's wonderful. So now let's hear from Emily with United Way, our last access to services.
Hi. Yeah. So we talked a lot about the different connections between the organizations that we were a part of and how they might help each other out. And one interesting connection was that the person from Lancaster Housing Authority was saying that during COVID, it's been more difficult for people to get out, and therefore like a lot of the homes are becoming more cluttered and like stuff just keep piling up. And one option for that would be that the people at Landis at Home organization that do stuff with like packing and moving, they also in their job do stuff with decluttering and organizing. And there might be some sort of connection with not the packing and moving part, but like the decluttering and organizing skill that could be used for people at Lancaster Housing Authority. Yeah. I think you're still on mute.
Yeah, okay, there we go. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
So we're going to switch gears and we're going to move into our first housing group. Mary?
Hi, everyone. Well, first of all, we wish we had more time to discuss things, but with regard to the pandemic, I think isolation and living alone was an issue that came up. Affordable housing is certainly a big issue. We learned a little bit from Brian about a shared housing idea, and even tiny houses in the city. People are afraid of eviction, and there's a lot of social isolation, anxiety, technology gaps, and things like that. We also, talked a little bit about, we learned a little bit from each other about how expensive housing is in Lancaster County and Lancaster City, and that a lot of the houses need to be updated. And on the third question that we tackled, people were really excited about the Z tutoring session and wish that it would go and hope it'll go from a pilot project to something that lots of different groups and people can embrace. We also learned something about a program called Teen Years, which many of you or some of you may know about, but that's a national tutoring program. And a couple suggestions that we just need to support agencies who provide services to seniors. And if you know a senior, give them a call. So thank you. And
Thank
thank you,
you.
Kevin, for taking notes.
Thank you. And we're 3 minutes to ending. And so for those of you that do have to hop off right at 11:30, we'll understand, but we hope that the rest of you can stay for a few extra moments. And Judy, you're next up with housing.
Sure. So our group spent a lot of time talking about the issues of affordable housing and the lack of affordable housing as it applies to seniors, but also to everybody in Lancaster. And the one new idea that came up that we would just put out on the table, this is not an immediate thing to work on, but it's to think about at least, was we talked about the notion that it's very hard for people to get housing subsidies, that the waiting list is so long for subsidies. And when apartments are otherwise not affordable, then you end up not being able to find housing. So the suggestion was, couldn't we, through the community foundation perhaps, establish an endowment? There are plenty of people who are looking for places to give legacy gifts. If we could have a private endowment that would endow apartments, and it could, over time grow and just provide a subsidy for a certain number of apartments in the city that people could qualify for if they don't have the income to be able to afford housing. So that was a new idea that came up.
That's great. Thank you. And Yvonne Berge, would you tell us about your housing group, please?
Yep, you bet, Chris. Jonathan from the Hourglass Foundation was our recorder, and I'm going to pass it over to Jonathan.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for an excellent summit so far. This has been really informative. Just echoing a lot of what other folks have talked about so far on this call, including social isolation and issues of equity and inclusion in housing are really important that we talked about. We talked about using a different term in some retirement communities. It's not socially distance, it's physical distance. We want to stay socially connected, right? So just rephrasing it a little bit is maybe helpful in some ways in terms of linguistically. So one of the interesting ideas that came up in our discussion was about community and communal housing or shared housing. So where someone who is older might have a house that's too much house for them and don't need all that space. So they have younger folks move in with them and help to take care of the house and share some of the costs with living in their home. So that's one option. The other one is looking at Eastleigh and Peter Township has been implementing zoning changes to allow accessible dwelling units to be built on housing on a personal property and on private land. So that is if you create a little housing unit on your property, a little apartment, an accessory dwelling unit, so that you can have a little bit more income on your property if you're older, or a cheaper housing option for folks who are looking for something a little bit more affordable. So I think I hit the points there. So I'll move to the next one.
Thank you so much. I would love to have a conversation about each one of those. So we'll have to understand how what's happening today can go forward in other ways. Olivia, for purpose and meaning, we've got 5 groups there. So here we go.
Great. So yeah, first of all, totally agree with Mary that we just did not have enough time. We were having such a wonderful conversation, and it was so wonderful talking as a group. But we really had some really great conversation circling quite a bit around like, how do we invite people to the table? Because as we kind of talked about before, starting that conversation is like the first step to really creating critical change. And so we talked about, how do we get people in the same room? How do we make conversations that are maybe a little bit heavier? How do we kind of segue into that so that we can feel safe in the conversation to talk about the things that we need, either as younger people like myself or as, our aging population in the city. We also talked about certain topics like figuring out how to still be like lifelong learners, and how to continue learning and educating, but specifically in an intergenerational kind of way. And some of the potential programs that could be helpful with that, for example, Anne talked about Fortnightly, which is a really wonderful place for conversation and seminars. We also talked about Quest, the Common Hour at Franklin and Marshall, just as a couple places to maybe think about ways to be talking in an intergenerational kind of way, while also moving toward the change that we want to see in our city.
Thank you, Olivia. And I hope your chat recorder captured a lot of these good things, because we need to move through. Our next person is Kate for Purpose and Meaning. Kate Good from Parish Resource Center.
Thank you. Sandy is actually going to report for our group.
Hi, I'm going to skip over everything we talked about that's already been mentioned as best I can, but I don't think it was mentioned that people need support with dealing with this world through technology. Online banking is difficult, even social media. Some of us have gotten pretty good with it, but some have not. And managing online doctor's appointments and that sort of thing. So that there's a great need for technical support for those who find it hard and frustrating. Purpose and meaning in later life was defined as something to do when you wake up every morning. And it was suggested that there should be some sort of government type jobs. If people are going to be living to 104, they're going to need to do something during the day to feel purpose and meaning. It was also mentioned to bring back family connections in all different ways, which we are learning from this COVID virus to do online. And I suggested joining the Speaking of Old Facebook group, and I did put that in the chat. Okay. And everybody's invited to join. And then for things we can do in 6 days, 6 weeks, or 6 months, the idea of multi-generational, multicultural pen pals. Bring back, support your post office. And this would be based on a theater group that I just learned about that's doing theater by email, but not by email, by actual written letters. Excuse me.
Andy, I'm going to move on so we can wrap up, but these are things that we'll want to follow up. I hope people will want to. And we'll move on to Wendy, then Kristen and Maddie.
Hi, Mitch is going to report out for our group. So I'm going to defer to Mitch.
Okay, Mitch, unmute. Yeah.
Than I do, but basically we were just discussing our concerns with seniors and the isolation that they may be experiencing in retirement communities, nursing homes, and just the, this how being separated from family members and with visitation restrictions and things that are cause for concern. And so we also mentioned about making every effort to ask for our opinions of our seniors and include them in conversation and so that we can make better decisions for the community that's more well-rounded.
Thank you. Well done. And Kristen.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm unmuted now. Okay.
So our group was group number 4 for purpose, and we really identified that through COVID, one of the main issues is the isolation and loneliness, as many people have stated, and that really kind of thwarts a sense of purpose and meaning for an older individual. A lot of the virtual type of platforms aren't necessarily aging friendly because of access or just lack of ability to operate them, and so we touched base on maybe potential solutions to help in those areas, and one being Lisa joined our group with Office of Aging, and then Todd from PCAD, and so we had the thought about using intergenerational, more of higher education students coordinating with either senior centers or individuals who are maybe attending virtual senior centers or in their homes to help with instructions on how to use technology, and or just picking up the phone to provide that, socialization just via a phone call, check-in. One of the problems we identified was really getting the word out. And I think I heard another group mention maybe some possibilities around that.
Kristen, thank you so much. And Maddie, bring us home.
Sure. So I echo most of the things everyone else has said from the purpose and meaning groups. We discussed a lot of those things as well. A big thing that we covered was that purpose and meaning means different to every person. So having those opportunities available, whether that be through something like bingo, exercise classes, volunteer opportunities, music, art, all of those things, and having access to them are very important. Technology and embracing it. You can't force someone, an older adult, to embrace technology or want to learn it. So also having opportunities for those people. And I think one of the fun things that we discussed was meals and mail are a good way to connect with people. So, over a meal at the mailbox, that's, for everybody. You don't need, to have any special skills for those things. So that's a good way to connect. But yeah, that's what we discussed.
Well, thanks, Maddie. And as often happens, housing, one thing can fall through the cracks. And today it was housing. Deb Jones, could you give us your report from housing group?
Right. Oh, well, thank you. So I did include it in the comment section in the chat.
Good.
And so a lot of good nuggets, couple quick takeaways, and that is we need to change the dialogue in the conversation. So much stigma comes to affordable housing, that terminology, and it is a right for all people of all ages. The second takeaway is that we need to get involved in our community. We need to really focus on the grassroots organization and get in front of the supervisors and the planning commission and our borough managers to be able to advocate for the housing in our communities. And that's where a lot of change can take place.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you to all of you that stayed over. Appreciate that. We will keep the room open for people that do want to chat, and you can unmute yourselves when we hop off. As far as next steps, we're happy to say there is a brand new Age-Friendly Lancaster City Facebook page, and we're hoping that can be a way that you are helped to connect with others that may want to take a step in the next 6 days, 6 weeks, or 6 months to make a difference in our community by looking at aging, by looking at where you are on the continuum, and by helping Lancaster City and County be all embracing to all ages. Thank you so much. With that, class is dismissed, and you're welcome to stay after for recess.